Hello, everyone! And in my continual pursuit to try to be hip and with it with the kids, I've decided to make a tier list for the Hunter events in Fury of Dracula. Partly because, previous statement about trying to be hip and with it, but also because I think this would be useful for people who are holding on to events and maybe are trying to decide if it is worth it to draw an extra one when you are full, and which ones are good to get rid of, and which ones you do not. And also just to make different things. So let's get started. These are in no particular order. We'll start with lucky. Maybe I should actually let me talk about the tiers first. Different people do different tiers differently. I would consider B as average and usable, and A and C are above average and below average. And to get into S or D tier, you have to be special in some way, like some sort of extra special good or extra special bad in some way that breaks the game, arguably. So I think a good tier list has a whole bunch in B, and then maybe half that number in A and C, and then almost nothing in S and D. Let's see if it ends up that way, and if I am good at following my own rules. So, Lucky Find. Lucky Find is a card that is good if you're doing badly. If you are in a fight and don't have all of your items, but if you're in a fight and don't, you should always have all of your items. Occasionally, it can be useful if you're jumped on, or if you really want to dig for a heavenly host, or if you're really sure it's the final fight, and so you want to swap out your fast horses for, something good. For that reason, I would put Lucky Find in C tier. I have discarded it on occasion. It isn't very good. You should never need it. But occasionally it can be good because you don't always have full items, so it's not extra special bad, it's just kind of bad, so I will put it there. Jonathan Harker is an ally, which automatically makes him more valuable because of surprising return. Which part of me is like, okay, should I up surprising return because of that, or up allies because of that? If you don't know what I'm talking about, watch my video on surprising return. His actual ability of being able to reveal the final location when it slides there is pretty situational, and situational generally means I put it in the lower tiers. It's not so situational that I put it in D tier, and so I put him in C tier as well. Mostly, I would say, because of the search effect comboing with surprising return being really good. Speedy Telegraph, another C tier event. This is, again, situational for me tends to mean lower tier unless it's really, really powerful. When it works okay and can give you some real nice. It can save you some day actions by having Mina go first with her Psychic Bond or with Hypnosis. But it's not as situational as these other two. The situations where Speedy Telegraph is useful is a little more common than you think. But the value it gives you isn't super high, so I put that in C tier. I'm looking at these and I'm like, a whole bunch of these are C tier. Let's do something that isn't C tier. Blood Transfusion. Easily D tier. I have seen this played, I think, twice in all of my hundreds and hundreds of games, and it wasn't that useful. So it is the most situational, because bites aren't all that common, bites aren't all that bad. It damages you to use it. It's really hard to use and doesn't provide much value. It's the worst card in any conceivable way. So, yeah. Wax Cylinders. This is going to be B tier, I think. Both of these abilities are very good. Revealing Hide can find you a Dracula in the first week, which is really good. And you can keep using it for that effect. Finding the Hide isn't necessarily always that good because Dracula knows Wax Cylinders is in the deck, and if you've used it for the analysis ability to try to reveal if Hide's in the deck, he'll know that you're going to potentially do that again. So it's really easy for Dracula to play around, so the potential for a super big play from this, not super common, but the things that it does are really good. The deduction ability is really nice to check to see if you need to take out a vampire, and that can really save you day actions to know, do I need to take care of this, do I need to not? That happens once after you've used it for its analysis ability. So generally you're going to probably get two actual uses out of this, discovering hide and then maybe using it to discover hide again, but I don't think I've ever seen that happen. And then revealing if there's being able to look at an encounter. Those are pretty high value. They're not super high value, and so something that is reliable and good, I wouldn't call it situational because the number of situations that either of those things work in is pretty universal. That makes it really good. Another thing that sort of keeps this from getting into like A tier, S tier is the fact that it's only usable by Jonathan Harker, so you have to spend a few actions to get it to work, but it's a good card. Long Night, I would actually put this in D tier. I was debating whether or not to put it in C tier or D tier, because, I mean, movement is important, but risking giving Dracula cards is not really good. And yeah, you can combo it with Mystic Research to guarantee that you move, but you know what's better is just getting the events from Mystic Research. There are very, very few times when Long Night is useful. Very often I'll play Long Night in day, and then in my day actions will have found Dracula anyway, and then not need to use Long Night. Or you use it and give Dracula a really powerful card. So it's situational, and even in the situations where it's good, there's a chance that it is actually bad for you. And that's, I really can't. Discarding it's better than Blood Transfusion because like I've seen Long Night used, and like especially if say Dracula just wolf formed and you want to check a bunch of locations, or if you're afraid he's about to misdirect, then again maybe, and that's a super situational situation, and it also has that downside, and the downside is just so bad. Dracula cards are so strong, you don't want to risk giving Dracula an event to get that night movement. I have seen this played, and I have played it myself, but it's really bad. Chartered Carriage. I would put this in B tier. It rarely lets you jump onto Dracula's location, but the amount of just raw movement that it gives is quite good, especially in Eastern Europe. And so because of that, it is just like movement is a thing you do throughout the whole game, and moving fast is always good. So this is like the least situational card out there, and it gives a lot of value, being able to move very fast. But because Dracula tends to avoid rail locations, it isn't something that you usually use to actually just like get on Dracula's location. And so for that reason, I'm putting it in B tier, because it doesn't have that really high upside potential of getting a super play. I mean, sometimes maybe you can. It's also cancelable by false tip, which is another thing sort of keeping it out of A tier. But it is a strong B tier card, very good. I'd feel pretty bad if I had to discard one of these. Money Trail, that's going to be A tier. This is the best card for ocean movement. You just reveal an ocean space. You want to wait to use it, but this will basically guarantee reveal Dracula's current location. That's really good. It's situational in the sense that it's only useful if Dracula goes to sea, which is one of the things that I would say pulls it out of S tier, but revealing his current location is unimaginably powerful. Although the other thing you need to think about with this is that revealing his location doesn't make you any better at actually jumping onto him, because if he's at sea, he can escape generally to multiple different locations. So Money Trail is a very important part of what is necessary for a successful attack plan. It's not the full attack plan like a certain card in this deck, but it's a part of it, an important part. It's reliable, but its situationality it keeps it from getting higher. But yeah, I definitely would say that is an A tier draw. Let's talk about what I was just referring to. Consecrated Ground, easily S tier. In fact, I think it might be the only card in S tier. I feel like Consecrated Ground should have its own tier. because it does everything. It blocks movement. It reveals Dracula's trail. It blocks wolf form movement. It blocks escape as bat movement. Um, like you use it at night, so you use it after you've moved and figured out how to set up and attack Dracula, or like after a fight with Dracula, and then oh no, he's about to escape. Use consecrated ground, block him off, force him to attack you. Um, I mean, you have to use Heavenly Hosts to get its maximum effect, but you should be collecting Heavenly Hosts anyway because it's the best card in the game. And it combos with this, the best card in the game. Just watch my video on Consecrated Ground or play against me, and you'll see why this card wins games. Even just blocking off a single location can be huge. And then if you can up that to 2 or 3 or 4, you can block up to 4 locations. There are situations where you can literally win the entire game with Consecrated Ground. There are places in the map where if you throw down 4 spaces that make it where Dracula cannot move, he literally cannot move, takes 5 damage, clears down to 1 trail. Continues, cannot move, takes 5 damage, clears down to 1 trail. And then he does that until he dies. Yeah, it's the whole package. It also reveals encounters. It does this. I should not need to explain to you why this is the best card in the game. Hold on to it, and if you discard it, I will personally come to your house and stare at you judgingly. Okay, moving on. Let's go with Rufus Smith. Everybody talks about how great Rufus Smith is, and he's like, oh my gosh, Rufus Smith, he's so great. He deals with Pirate Dracula, and he can give you extra damage. Yeah, he's in B tier. I kind of maybe thought about wanting to put him in A tier, but I thought about, like, okay, how much damage does Rufus Smith do in a given game? Maybe like 3 or 4, maybe 5 damage. That's pretty good, but Dracula has to choose to take that damage, and so usually what happens when you have Rufus Smith out is Dracula just doesn't go to C. Now, if you're good at the game, you actually want Dracula to go to sea. Draculas that stay on land and leave down a whole bunch of encounters are actually kind of hard, especially if they're in Central Europe. Going to sea can be bad, and even devastating, and Rufus Smith eliminates that, and he gives you free damage, and all of those are good things, and that's why he's in B tier. People will say he's like the best card in the game and you can't win without him. Those are people who don't know how to deal with Dracula on land, and you really need to know... You really need to be good enough with dealing with Dracula on land that you scare him to the sea to get that free damage. And this really only slightly increases that free damage. But free damage is free damage, and that's good. I would say he's the best ally. But one of the best cards in the game? He's more average, in my opinion. Sense of Emergency. This is an A tier card. I almost wanted to put this in S tier, but the fact that it damages you twice, and the fact that Fast Horses is a card that exists, doesn't really make this like necessary in order to win, or a instant game changer when you draw it, which is what Consecrated Ground is. If you get Consecrated Ground, it's a game changer. Sorry about that. I dropped my headset. If you get Consecrated Ground, it is a game changer. The way that you play the game changes after you draw Consecrated Ground. Sense of Emergency, it's really good. You can jump onto Dracula's location. You can combo it with Renewed Vigor. It's really it moves you 3 spaces. And some people say, oh, 3 spaces, and it's not by rail. That isn't as good as starter carriage. Those people are wrong. Sense of Emergency. Draculas tend to avoid rails, and sometimes going by road is faster than going by rail, and those are the kind of places where Dracula likes to hang out. And even if not, 3 moves is so fast, and it's so good to have on lower initiative people, which, yeah, it does require some setup. You got to trade it to Van Helsing, although having it on Van Helsing isn't bad. It's best on Mina, because she has higher health, and so she can afford to take the damage. Damaging Van Helsing to use Sense of Emergency, that hurts a little bit. But if he's going in with a group, it doesn't matter as much. This is another important tool in any toolbox for taking down Dracula. Hold on to it; it's really good. But it's not S tier. It's no Consecrated Ground. Heroic Leap. I put this in B tier. Heroic Leap fixes the one-on-one problem. It has a lot of uses. You can deal Dracula 5 damage, which is not as much as you think because of all of Dracula's healing options. And it damages you for 5, which is pretty significant. But it's really good to have on somebody who you don't want to have be in a fight. And you can use it to kill reckless vampires. And that really gives it enough uses that I'd put it in B tier. I wouldn't put it in the higher tiers because weakening Dracula doesn't really kill Dracula. Dracula can run away and heal. But it's good. I mean, it's good to do the 5 damage. It forces him to slow down and heal, which can let you catch him. And you can win games with this. Even if you dying would lose you the game, the damage to Dracula is resolved before the damage to yourself is resolved. So, yeah, Heroic Leap, really good. But, averagely good, I would say. Definitely a B tier card. Now, Planned Ambush, I would actually put Planned Ambush in C tier. It's not as good as Heroic Leap, because the point of these cards is to help you in one-on-one fights. Planned Ambush helps you in the first round of a one-on-one fight. Heroic Leap helps you with the entire fight. You don't do the fight, and instead you just take 5 damage and deal 5 damage. That's really good. Planned Ambush, it helps you in a one-on-one, but you shouldn't be trying to get on one-on-ones. It's useful, don't get me wrong, but it's very specific. The amount of help it gives is significant in some circumstances, but usually only accounts for a little bit of damage and only in one-on-one fights. In groups of hunters, it doesn't provide you that much help because Dracula is just going to choose to attack the person who didn't play Planned Ambush. So that makes it situational. It gives a lot of value, but yeah, I'd put it of these that we have in here right now. I'd say it's probably the highest. Well, maybe Jonathan Harker is actually pretty good. They're kind of similar, but hey, that's why they're all in the same tier. Okay. Other things. Forewarned. This is A tier purely because it is the only counter to fog. Well, no, that's not quite true. Evil Presence, not Evil Presence. Behind the Veil is also a counter to fog, although it's a less reliable counter to fog. And Forewarned can also do a whole bunch of other stuff. Like, it's a counter to fog, which already makes it really good, but it also can be used on any ambush, like bats, or wolves if you don't have a weapon and it would kill you, or you can use Forewarned to counter the Saboteur on the beginning, in order to kill the vampire, where the Saboteur is protecting the vampire. So it has a ton of uses, and one of those uses stops one of the best cards in the game. Whether or not you're able to reliably use that to counter fog is not necessarily as much of a sure thing. But its general usefulness and its high upside in being able to potentially counter fog puts it in A tier. Escape Route. This is a C tier card. Some people might say that it's D tier. I don't think I would say that. Sometimes you really do want to get out of fights. And fights are a thing that happen a lot, so it's not as random as you might think. Or not as situational as you might think. And you can get it to the people who need it. And especially if this is on Van Helsing and then somebody moves into a space and it's like, ooh, I actually really don't want to get into a fight with Dracula right now because he'll escape his bat. Oh, and I can escape route. And the fact that this is an event, not an item, is really good because you can hold on to items that you need, like stakes and horses, and things like that wouldn't help you in combat, but that are useful, and then escape route can keep you from getting into the fights. That said, usually the reason this is in C tier is because it sounds like I'm talking really great about it. Is that usually what escape route prevents you from is 2 to 4 damage, which is kind of okay. 2 to 4 damage is bad, but it's not that bad. That's just a few night actions, and usually you don't have a whole lot to do with your night actions. So it's generally useful at providing a little bit of value, which I think is the definition of a C tier card. Good Luck, I would put that also in C tier. So Good Luck counters, I can't read this because it was too small, but it counters False Tip, Roadblock, and it can be used to discard allies. Watch my video on Good Luck if you want to know the stats on that. They're not huge. The biggest thing holding Good Luck back is that Dracula almost never uses his allies for their ally effect. He almost always uses them for their once per game effect. Now, canceling false tip, very valuable, and canceling roadblock can be very valuable. I'm putting this in so that in very, very valuable, like high end upside. So this is one of those situational cards that when you have it and you're able to cancel a Dracula card, which, whenever Dracula has a Dracula card, the hunter should always be afraid. Being able to cancel that is just one of the best things in the world. And yeah, it only removes one of the 3 roadblocks, but usually that's enough. Usually only one of the 3 roadblocks is the one that is really hurting you, and the other 2 are there just so Dracula can discard them instead of the one that's actually hurting you. In Digital Edition, this has to be used sort of in initiative order, so you actually want to get Good Luck on Lord Godling so that he can use it on his turn, which isn't an action, by the way. You use it, and then you do your normal action. And so that's something to keep in mind. So when it is useful, it's very useful, but usually this sits in your hand all game and doesn't do anything. Mystic Research. This... I don't think this goes in S tier. It's very good. It's the event card that gives you more event cards. And you can do it as a night action, so it doesn't get rid of your day actions, which is excellent. Whether or not those event cards are all that useful is sort of random, and so that's why this is in S tier. It's going to get you more event cards. How many event cards it gets you, we don't know, and it can be turned off with a hoax. But event cards are good, and so part of me wants to put this in S tier because it's the event card that gets you more event cards. But it could get you not very many good event cards, or it could get you a whole lot of good event cards. It could give you Consecrated Ground. If this gets you Consecrated Ground, then it's a good card. But you still have to spend actions. You can combo it with Long Night, but I mean that only kind of bumps Long Night up to maybe a C, and I really wouldn't do that. But yeah, it's sort of the least situational card ever. It's always useful, and will always provide at least some value, if not significant value. So that puts it in A tier. I'd say it's better than all of these 3, but that's just because it could get you one of these 3. So, yeah. Great Strength. I actually think Great Strength should go in A tier. And maybe I'm biased because I've recently had many games that I have won from Great Strength. Great Strength just prevents a bite result, which is not the full text of a thing that would bite you, but just simply the bite damage, or fatal damage. That's actually, but the thing is, it can be played by anybody. They don't have to be in the combat, and it's the ultimate surprise Dracula card, where Dracula thinks, "Oh, I can kill this guy, and then he won't be able to do his thing, so I'll do it." And then you can be like, haha, no, Great Strength. And there's no Dracula event card or no trick that can counter that. Other than knowing that he has Great Strength, or maybe, I don't know, using Vampiric Influence to discard it. But that surprise value of being able to do extra damage to Dracula and win, and the fact that anyone can use it, that just... if from anywhere. It's so good. You can win a lot of games with it. You can be doing an attack where if you would die, like you're doing a knife and you have 2 hit points left, and he does, or you have 4 hit points left and he does claws and you do knife to do the 3 damage. That would be an example. Or he does claws and you're going for a heavenly host with 4 hit points left. Those kind of things. And it can save, say, Mina from dying if she's been mesmerized and you're worried about her getting a bite result. Now, that doesn't let her do the damage because, again, if you get all of the things that give you bite results also remove the people from combat. But making people not die, so you give Dracula influence, that's really good. Making it where you can do a surprise more damage to Dracula, that's really good. Basically, all of this card's uses are super epic surprise good uses. If Dracula knows you have this, its value goes down to like C tier or B tier. But if you keep this hidden, it just allows for a ton of really, really great plays. Maybe not the best A tier card, but I think it still belongs in A tier. Vampire Lair. I think this is C tier. 2 points is not a lot. You have to waste a day action and a night action to do it, and have a stake. Usually people have better things to do, but if they don't, and you can get this to who needs it, yeah, removing 2 influence is good. But it's not that good. But in most games, Dracula will get 2 influence, so this is sort of always at least a little useful. So, I wouldn't call it some people would call it situational because you only want it on somebody who isn't near Dracula. But a lot of times that happens, and because Van Helsing is a thing, you can trade it around to the people who need it. It just doesn't provide that much value, but it provides some. So I'd put it in C tier. Behind the Veil. The play immediately cards are hard to gauge because you don't hold on to them. So it's a little hard to gauge a Behind the Veil. It can get rid of fog, so I'd put it in B tier. But Forewarned is just so much better because Dracula has to have already committed to putting it down, and then he wastes putting that encounter down. With Behind the Veil, you remove the encounter, then Dracula gets to draw a new one. This just removes it from his hand, so he just often will put down a different one. Being able to look at his encounters is kind of useful, and so B tier. I mean, usually when you draw it, it's always good, unless you draw it, and it turns out he has no vampires and no bats and no fog, and then you've just helped Dracula. That's pretty rare, though. I'd say a lot of times this is used to eat a fog, but the fact that sometimes it doesn't, and so sometimes it isn't that useful, I put it in B tier. But like, B tier is still good. I mean, it's a good card. I mean, it's good to draw. Even if you don't get rid of fog, getting rid of a vampire is good. So, yeah, B tier. Surprising Return. I put this in B tier. It's pretty useful. It isn't universally useful. Sometimes you don't draw allies, or sometimes you just draw the one ally you want for the ally effect. But you can use it to pull allies back. If you want to switch from one to another, like Dracula's made landfall and he's pretty weak, so you don't think he's going to go there anymore, so you switch out for Sister Agatha. Or he goes to C, and then you play Surprising Return to pull out Rufus Smith. Although its biggest value is using it for those search effects. And you have it on tap. You can use it whenever you want, pull an ally, play it for the search effect, search a location, anywhere. And that's just really good, especially if you can get 2 of these. So that's just generally useful. I might value it more because, not to toot my own horn, but I'm pretty good at guessing where Draculas are. But that's a lot. When you play a lot, you'll get better at it, and you can get into the psychology of it. And so, at high-level play, again, tooting my own horn, Surprising Return can be really good and really fun. Although this isn't a tier list on what's most fun, it's a tier list on what's most useful. And I think this is pretty useful. Sometimes it isn't useful at all, because you don't draw any allies, but that's pretty uncommon, especially if you're drawing a lot of events. So you'll see some use out of this, and you'll probably get a lot of use out of it. Even if you're revealing locations and it turns out Dracula isn't there, it lets you check the other locations. So yeah, a good card. Hypnosis. So I compare Hypnosis to Money Trail a lot, because they both reveal Dracula in some ways. I put it in B tier, even though it's more useful than Money Trail because it's for his land movements instead of his ocean movements. But the 2 reasons I don't put it higher is, 1, Mina has to become delayed and has to be with somebody, so you really have to set it up. Of course, Mina has to be the one who has it to use it. And oh goodness, what was the other thing I don't like about Hypnosis? Oh, it only reveals the region, which is useful, but a lot of times when you're really getting on Dracula, you know what region he's in. And if Mina and somebody else are near him, she can do her normal psychic bond to reveal him. So a lot of times you don't even need to use Hypnosis. It's great to have it just on reserve if he goes to sea and escapes and gets somewhere and you need to figure out where he went. you can use it then. Still, the fact that it burns up a day action regardless because she uses it and then becomes delayed, so even if you use it at night, she'll become delayed the next action. So her day action will be lost. So it has a lot of cost associated with it. It has a lot of return, but Money Trail has, I would say, more return for less cost. The only real cost is he goes to sea. So yeah, B tier for Hypnosis, which may surprise some people. But yeah, let's say Sister Agatha. I think Sister Agatha is C tier. She's good, and she's an ally, so part of me wants to move all the allies up one space because of the fact that they're allies. Sister Agatha mostly just keeps Dracula from doing as many fang attacks and punishes him if he escapes. That's good, but really all it does is take away the healing effect of fangs, turning fangs into a weak move. But fangs isn't really the move that should be scaring the hunters. I mean, it does a little bit, and it's a little scary to Mina. But yeah, strength and mesmerize are the cards you really need to worry about. So making it more likely that Dracula's going to play those cards that you don't like, it's not that great. Punishing him for escaping, I mean, that means he's successfully escaped, which means the hunters aren't really doing their job there. 2 damage is nice. It can be really nice at the end of the game when Dracula's really weak, and so it really limits what he can do, but that's kind of a win more situation. But then, on the other hand, you would say, oh, well, but the escaping as bat, canceling that is really great. Yeah, well, but it doesn't cancel it. It's not a cancel of an escape. It's just if he escapes, he takes damage. And that's kind of a consolation prize. But I mean, fights with Dracula, if you're playing well, you need to be getting into a lot. And this is useful, and she's an ally. And so the fact that you can use her with the search effect with the surprising return means there's no way she's going into D tier. But yeah, C tier for Sister Agatha. Excellent weather. I view this very similar to Chartered Carriage, so I'm going to put it in the same tier. It lets you move fast at sea, which it's the only way you can move fast at sea. There's a lot of things that let you move fast at land. Horses, chartered carriage, sense of emergency. This is the only thing that lets you move fast at sea. So even though it doesn't, air quotes, make you go as fast as some of those other cards, it does make you go quite fast. So basically everything I said about chartered carriage applies to excellent weather. Except I'd say it's less likely of being able to use this to jump onto Dracula's location. You just sort of move twice, and so because in the digital edition you can't use it at sea, which you should, in my opinion, according to the rules. I think the only rule is when you're at sea, you must move at sea, and excellent weather says as an action, move at sea twice. I think that fulfills the requirement, but don't get me into that. It's fast card like Chartered Carriage, and that's useful. So yeah, B tier. There's not much more I can say about it other than to compare it to Chartered Carriage. And 1/3 of this game is managing your movement, and it helps you with that. So B tier. It's not like the best thing ever, but it's generally always going to be useful. Even if Dracula's not at sea, it's going to be still really helpful to you because you can move fast, and moving fast is a way to win the game. Let's do some of these play immediately. Evil Presence and Local Rumors. I put it C tier. Just because, and again, play immediately's are hard to gauge their usefulness of. When they're useful, they're super useful. So like A tier. But when they're not, they don't provide. When they fail to reveal anything, they usually don't give you that much information and then become D tier. So sort of an average between that is like C, B tier, middle, but I'm going to narrow them down to C tier because you don't choose when to do this. It's just a random thing that helps you. Sometimes they can help you reveal ocean locations because oceans are adjacent to hunters. I would say Evil Presence is more useful than Local Rumors because Local Rumors is just you, but Local Rumors actually reveals it actually flips the cards. Whereas Evil Presence just says, Dracula is adjacent to these people. But yeah, C tier because they're random. Hired Scouts is B tier, though. Hired Scouts is a lot more targeted. If you can get really good with this, you can really reveal things. But it also has the... So the thing about Hired Scouts that Evil Presence and Local Rumors don't have is when you aren't near Dracula and you're just sort of sitting around, Hired Scouts is still useful because you can reach out and guess some faraway place. Like, there's a whole bunch of times when Evil Presence and Local Rumors comes out and it's like, oh, no one is near Dracula, and it's like, yeah, no kidding, I already knew that, so this isn't new information. Whereas Hired Scouts, it can be like, ooh, I wonder if he's over there, or I wonder if he's over there, or I think maybe he might be in this place. And since you can get a bunch of those coming out, and you can combo with it with Surprising Return, you can, if you want, you can eliminate entire regions, and that's really good. Especially if you start understanding how movement works and being like, if I do these two that are far away from each other, because he has 6 movements on the trail, there's no way that he could be in between them, and I can remove an even bigger part. But then it's also useful if you're like chasing for Dracula and then he moves and it's like, oh, he could be in one of 6 locations. And then you night supply or day supply or something, or somebody who isn't even near their supplies and gets Hired Scouts, and it's like, aha, I can remove these locations that are the furthest away or the closest or whatever you want to pick. And then sometimes you discover him with that. So yeah, a lot of general use, although usually you get very little use out of this, but you always get something. Whereas with Evil Presence and Local Rumors, it feels like you don't always get something. Newspaper reports is probably the hardest one to gauge here. Because, like, it's necessary for your strategy, or at least my strategy, and that makes me want to put it in S tier, because you have to have newspaper reports in order to find Dracula's starting location. But after you've revealed him that first time, it's kind of not great. You generally are only using it to reveal the 5th and 6th location, which if you're having to use it for that, you're kind of in a bad situation. You don't want to get into it. You don't want to get into that. So in that sense, it's C tier, or even D tier, honestly. If it only was the second effect of 5th and 6th, it would almost feel like a high D tier card. So I really don't know how to gauge this. Is it the best card in the game or the worst card in the game? I don't know. I'll just stick it in B tier, because that's sort of the average of the two. But if somebody comes out and says newspaper is S tier, I totally understand what they mean. And if somebody comes out and says newspaper reports is D tier, I kind of know what they mean. So yeah, B tier. Lucy's Revenge, I think I'd put that as B tier. It's not... I'd say it's not as good as Great Strength. But it is definitely better than Sister Agatha. Because Lucy's Revenge, now it has to be used by Lord Godalming. He plays it at the start of combat, and at some point during that combat, it can be used to cancel an Escape his Bat or Escape his Mist. And that's really good. The cancel, like, it does not go off. He does not escape, and then I do damage anyway. It can also be used to with the effect of Great Strength. Cancel fatal damage or a bite, but only to Lord Godalming specifically. That keeps it from getting a little higher, because Lord Godalming has a bunch of HP anyway, so the fact that he's going to die to HP is kind of low, and canceling a bite result is only useful if it's keeping him from dying, so he had to have been already bitten and then get bitten again. So in that sense, it's kind of situational, but the situations are really good. Like, in some senses, this is a combination of Great Strength and Sister Agatha. And it's like, okay, that's really good, actually. You can prevent him from dying, or you can cancel Escapes his Bat, and that's better than Sister Agatha. The canceling, it doesn't damage him if he escapes. He just does not escape. That's really good. So, yeah, it takes some setup, not a ton of setup, and you need to be careful about when you play it. You probably don't want to play it when Godalming's full health, unless you're in a situation where you think Dracula will be able to escape, in which case it becomes really, really good. So it's one of those swinging cards, and things that are swingy that could be super good or never come into play, yeah, I put it in B tier. Now, Renewed Vigor, I think, is the only card deserving of being next to Consecrated Ground. And at first I was thinking when I made this tier list that I was going to have Consecrated Ground be the only S tier card. I don't think so. I think Renewed Vigor is good enough. Consecrated Ground is better, but Renewed Vigor allows so much awesomeness. When I think about what I wanted in S tier, I was thinking, what is it when you draw this card, it changes how you play the game? Renewed Vigor changes how you play the game. It lets you do 2 actions. Now, the actions can't be the same category of action. So you can't play 2 special events, but you can move and do a special event. You can move and supply. You can do a rail movement and then a horse movement. And currently in the game, it actually lets you chartered carriage and then horse move, which I think is accurate. Now, it also lets you chartered carriage and then normal move, which I think isn't. I think you shouldn't be allowed to use chartered carriage as the special event because chartered carriage is phrased as when you move. So this isn't a special action. This is a normal move action that just becomes modified, and I don't think that makes it special. But in the game it does, and I can understand the argument for doing it that way. Fury of Dracula is complicated, with really complicated rules with a lot of debate on how to interpret them, and the digital game does a decent job coming up with reasonable decisions. But the point is, Renewed Vigor allows for crazy combos, but also is just good. Even if you just use it to move and supply. Although you should really only use that when you're trying to jump on Dracula, which can be really good, actually. Just the move into Dracula's space and then supply so that you switch out your horses for a weapon or something like that. Or you rest to heal. There's like no circumstances where using Renewed Vigor doesn't give you massive value. It doubles your day actions. That's just so good. And yeah, they can't be the same day action, but okay, who cares? I mean, you can move and stake in the daytime, or try to fight a vampire in the daytime. You can supply and then move, although usually you're going to use it for the double moves. And the double moves are crazy. They're absolutely crazy. The amount of moves you can make and how far you can move, even with the limitation of you can't do 2 special actions or 2 move actions. You can chartered carriage and then sense of emergency. Or chartered carriage and then horse. Or chartered carriage and then normal move. Or normal move and sense of emergency. That's 4 road moves. You know how far that can get you? Crazy. And yeah, you have to get set up for it, but you should be getting events the whole game. And you should be holding on to your sense of emergencies, and to an extent, your chartered carriages only when you need them. Yeah, it changes the game. I put it in S tier, and the fact you can get 2 of them, it's real good. So, yeah, that's my tier list for the events. Hopefully this will be helpful for you in deciding what to discard, what to hold on. If you disagree with me, just do know that these are just my opinions, which means that they are objective fact, and so if you disagree with me, then you're wrong, and I'm sorry. So, yeah.